see about life cycle foods, the question and answers. I have around 13 questions and answers for this topic. Okay. So, what is the first question? What are life cycle hoods and how many hoods we have? What is a life cycle hook? If you take a component, there are different stages. Okay. In a component, we have different like initialization and content creation and view completion and destruction. So we have different stages. So these life cycle hoods are being facilitated by Angular so that you can make use of different stage in the component life cycle actually. So when you write these life cycle hoods in a component, Angular will call those methods at that stage. Okay, if you want to do certain things at maybe once the content is projected, content is created, you want to do something, you can make use of that. Or when you can do a cleanup activity when the component destroyed. So there are different life cycle stages. Life cycle of a component, different stages can be you can write these methods so that you can do some actions whatever you need at that stage of a life cycle of the component. Okay, hope you understood. So we have around 8 stages. Okay, we have first stage is ng on changes. So this ng on changes is the first life cycle method. So this is called whenever the at input from the parent is changed. Okay, from the for a component, whenever the at input of the parent is changed, this ng on changes is called. Okay, so this is the first method, and it is called whenever the at input is changed from the parent. Okay, and the parent changes the at input, the input which is projected from the parent to the child. So this method called every time, and it also has gets a parameter from which you can know that what was the previous value and what is the present value. And next thing is ng on it. We use it frequently, right? So ng on it is called when the component is initialized. Okay. Third stage is ng do check. This is called whenever the digest cycle happens in the for the component. Digest cycle is nothing but this is the cycle responsible for binding your values, okay, from the class to view and view to class. So this digest cycle happens whenever the Angular feels some changes possible to happen. So it will run the digest cycle. So you can use this for doing some changes which you have not informed to Angular. Okay, maybe a div which does not have a event listener. So the Angular will never know that some changes possible. So those type of changes which the Angular will not know, those values can be bound can be changed with this lifecycle hook. Okay. Next is ng after content in it. We will when we see about this, we'll see in depth. Okay. Ng after content in it is when the content is completely initialized. We have something called ngContent, that is content projection from the parent to child. When the parent uh, completely has initialized the child, when the content it has completely projected from parent to child, this method is called, this life cycle hook is called. So at this in this part of life cycle, you can completely access the content which was projected from the parent to child through ngContent. You can completely access that. Okay, and then ng we have ng after content check. This is for checking whether something changed in the content which got initialized. Okay, ng after view unit is the one which is getting called when the view is completely ready. The view, the component view is completely ready. And this is the lifecycle hook where you can access the DOM elements. That is the HTML DOM elements. You can easily reference it using element ref and change it if you want. So this is the only stage where the view is ready for you. Okay. And then we have ng after view check. This method is for checking whether view has changed by any way. So this always happens whenever Angular feels some view has changed something. So it checks whether something has changed in the view. At last we have ng on destroy. This is the last method. Here we can do all the cleanup tasks. So this will be called when the component, the user moves out of the component or you destroy that component. So at that point this will be called. You can do all the cleanup activities in this. So we have around 8 lifecycle hooks here. Okay. So let's move on to the next question. So this is the question. Okay. Before going to the next question, I just would like to explain the project which I will be using for explaining this answers for these questions. Okay. This is my sample project. Okay, this is a simple Angular project which I have written for explaining you the answers for lifecycle hooks. So what it has is it has a parent component and a child component. The parent component I've set up in such a way that parent component, whenever you type something, that input is getting injected to the child. Okay, through at input. Okay. And I have also content projected this component, sample component from the parent to the child. That also I have done. I have passed the input through at input, the information from parent to child, and I also projected this sample component from the parent to child. I will show you that shortly. So if you see in the code, you can see that you have two components. The parent component is employee list. Okay, this is the parent component. This is the employee list. And this employee list, if you go to the HTML, you can see that this is the parent component HTML. And in the parent HTML, you have the app employee. This is the child component inside the parent component. That's what you see it here, right? The child. It is this one, app employee. So to that child, I am passing this name as input. From the ng model which I have set in the parent, the name gets inserted inside the parent. Okay. The child is nothing but app employee, which is the app employee which I have created here. Okay. So you can see it here. This is the child component. So it has a at input through which it receives the input from the parent. Okay, you can see it here, employee input. You will find the same employee input here. So through this at input attribute only, it receives the value name, which is set as ng model in the parent. Okay. And next thing what I have done is I have tried to content project this app sample into the app employee. This is app sample is nothing but the sample component. You can see it here. I have written something called sample component. So I have written something called sample component. Okay, this letter is app sample. So this component also I have put inside the child component, app employee. So whenever I put whatever I put inside the child component, I can take it from the child component using ngContent. This is called as content projection. Okay. So this whatever the content which is put inside the app employee will we can take it from the child component using ngContent. You can see it here, ngContent. So whatever content I put inside the child component, I take it here using the ngContent directive, which is present in Angular. We'll try to see when we go through each question in depth. Okay, this is what the setup is actually. I have the employee list, which is the parent, and app employee, which is the child. And whatever I input I give through the parent, it gets inside the child component through at input. And since I have given the sample component inside app employee, that is the child component tag, that is we can see that in the child component using ngContent. Okay, let me go to the first question so that you explain it better. Okay, so what is the first question? So what is the first life cycle first life cycle hook to be called? It is nothing but ng on changes. This is the first life cycle hook to be called. So this life cycle hook will be called not once, whenever the input changes. In the here this will be called ng on changes will be called whenever at input is changed from the parent. Here whenever this input is changed, this ng on changes will be called. You can see it because I have already put in the child component, I have already added a console log. Okay, if you go to this, you can see a console log for ng on changes. Sorry, not app employee, it is app employee. So I have already put a console log. So whenever the at input changes, this should be called, and we should be able to see this console in our input. And whatever the input it is receiving, this ng changes from this name input, you can able to derive from that. Let us see that. So whenever I will just go to the development tool, okay, and when you can just see through this, you can see just leave the parent. So for the child, this is the first life cycle method, life cycle hook to be called, and this will be called whenever we change the value from the parent, whenever that at input is changed from the parent. Whenever I type, you can see that. Maybe I will filter with ng on changes. So you can see this. Okay, let me delete it. Okay, let me also clear this. Whenever I type something, right, you can see ng on changes for every change of input, it is getting called. From that parameter of lifecycle hook, you can understand what was the previous value and the current value. So you can use this whenever you have a requirement like this. So you want to do something when the input at input from the parent changes. From whatever the value is getting changed from the parent, you can use this lifecycle hook. Okay. And it will be called every time the input is changed from the parent. So this is about ng on changes. This will be the first lifecycle hook to be called for a component. Understand? So this is a very important question. Try to understand first one. And the next one. So this is maybe when the input properties, the first one is whenever the input properties changes, what will be called? The same thing. Ng on changes will be called. At input, whenever it is changed from the parent, ng on changes will be called. Okay. Third, the next question. When the component is initialized, which method is called when the component is initialized? This is the very important function we lifecycle hook which we frequently use. That is ng on init. So it will be called when the component is created, not completed creation, but it is initialized. In that case, this lifecycle hook, if you have written, it will be called. So it will be called after ng on changes. Okay. And other important thing about this is it will be called only once in the life cycle of a component. Okay. So you can see that here when I take out this, and I also added a console log for ng on in it. So you should be able to see that. So after ng on changes, ng on in it will be called. Okay, this is where if you want to do any initialization for any variables, or if you want to create a database connection, you can go ahead and create in this lifecycle hook. And this will not be called for whenever ng on changes call, because ng on changes will be called for all the input changes. You can see this. ng on changes are called for every change in the input from the parent. But ng on changes will be called for every change in the input from the parent. But ng on it will be called only once, the first time when the component is initialized. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next question. So which life cycle hook runs for every digest cycle, and for if you want to do handle some element which you have not anywhere informed Angular about it, how to do some that maybe bind that value in Angular. Okay, what is a digest cycle first? Digest cycle is responsible for binding the values, maybe in the value in the view to the component class, or class the view to the view. So these two are binded. The same value is whatever is changed in the view is getting changed in the component class. This is happening because of digest cycle. So this digest cycle will be run by Angular every time Angular feels that some change is possible. Maybe when you add a click event handler to a button, this digest cycle will be triggered. Whenever you do HTTP call, this digest cycle will be triggered. So whenever Angular feels that some change might be possible, so that it can update the values from the view to class or class to view. So that digest cycle is run. So what lifecycle hook runs for every digest cycle in a component? Whenever that component's digest cycle is run. So the lifecycle hook name is ngDoCheck. This lifecycle hook is called for every digest cycle run, and you can use this. Maybe you have a input button and you don't have a you have not created any binding property binding for the value, or nothing you have created. In that case, that input element Angular will never know whether it will never start the digest cycle, because you have not created even binding or property binding. So no way Angular will know that this value may change whenever this input element is typed or something. So it will never start the digest cycle. For those elements, the value will not be synced from the class to view or view to class. So in that case, you can use this lifecycle hook to manually set the value. Maybe take the value from the view or from the view and change it in the class. Okay. You can do that change manually. You can manually set the value whenever you feel that the digest cycle is run. Okay. So let's move to the next question. What is ngContent? This is very important question. What is ngContent? ngContent is nothing but, okay, it is it is just a placeholder where all the projected content from the parent will be will be inserted inside ngContent. Okay, this ngContent is used for content projection. So the answer will be same even for content projection. Content projection is done using ngContent. Okay. how you can project a content from a parent to the child. If you go back to our example, I told you that I'm projecting the sample component from parent to child. How I have projected the sample component from parent to child. So whenever inside a child component, okay, this is a child component. If I put any component, okay, any value, it may not need not be a component, it can be a div or whatever. So whatever dynamic content you put inside these two, right? These two tags, selector tags for the child component. It can be a component or a simple DOM element, a div or span or whatever. So this element, right? You can have this element in the child using ngContent. So whatever you put inside these selectors, child component selectors, whatever you put inside this can be made available in the child component using ngContent. That's it. Whatever you put it inside that child component selectors, that that dynamic content can be made available in the child component by using ngContent. Okay, that's it. So this is about content projection. If you go to our application, you can see that this is the projected content. This sample words is nothing but the sample component. If you see, sample words is the content of the sample component. This sample component I have projected inside the employee list. I have inserted inside employee list. Okay. So this should will be available inside ngContent right now, inside the child component. We can see that. Let's see that. So you can see this. That component got inserted inside ngContent. You see. So inside ngContent, that content is available right now. That content got substituted inside ngContent. That's what I was trying to say. So this is about app sample. Okay, this is the sample component. This got injected inside the ngContent. Okay, sorry, it doesn't get inserted inside ngContent. Wherever you put ngContent, it gets substituted. That sample component gets substituted in the place of ngContent. Okay, okay, you can see it here. If you go to the child component class, so this is what has happened there. In this place, the sample component got substituted because I am sending that sample component inside the child component selectors. Okay, you can see this here. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Hope this is clear for you. So this can be an important question. So using ngContent, the content gets projected from the parent. The dynamic content gets projected from the parent to the child. So what is the lifecycle method called after the content is injected through ngContent or content projection happens? So after this content is projected, right? What lifecycle hook is called? When the content, dynamic content is projected from parent to child, what lifecycle hook is being called? If you take, this is the lifecycle hook, which is called after the content is projected. Okay. So in this lifecycle hook, you can get hold of the content because this lifecycle hook gets called after the content is projected from parent to child. So this is the only, you can't take the content projected in ng on changes or ng do check. You can take it only from ng after content init. Okay, you can see, I will just show you. If you see in the console, you can see after ng do check, the ng after content init will be called. Okay, so this gets called after the content is initialized in the child. Okay, and in this by using this template reference, let me go to this and see. So this is the ng after content in it, and this is the console I have added. So I have told you, right, only in this lifecycle hook you can reference the content which gets projected. You can reference that by using at content child. So since we are injecting sample component, you can simply say at content child sample component sample component. Okay, and this can be accessed by using this sample now, and using that sample I will also print this sample here in the same lifecycle hook, and this at content child decorator must be written over ng after content in it to get hold of the content. Now using that content, what I'm trying to do is, maybe if you see this you'll understand better. To access the content, if you just simply say at content child sample component, if the sample component is got injected into the child, it will be available in the sample, and using this sample you can change the color of it to green, maybe whatever. Okay, so let's see that in action. So if you go here, you will be able to see ng after content in it, and you can see here the using at content child we are able to access this sample component, because as I told you, only in ng after content init lifecycle hook this content will be available for you to reference it, to take it out from that. So simply here you have to mention the component. Okay, the component which I mean which I need to refer, since here sample component dot inserted, this will be available in this sample, and using this you can change the color also. Okay, it simply says this sample component has a color red, color green, maybe you can change it to red as also. Using the reference to that sample component you can even change it to red. Now it should be color red, you can see that. Okay, so this is about after content in it. Just understand that this will be called after the content got initialized from the parent to the child. Content get projected. What is at content child when it is available? So as I told you, at content child is a decorator, a method decorator which should be written above ng after content in it. Okay, using this at content child you can access, get hold of the content which got projected from the parent to the child. Since we have projected the sample component, we can access, you can get hold of that sample component in the component class using content child. This has to be imported. Okay, it will be from Angular core, and you have to mention the component which I'm interested to get a reference to, and maybe you just type say it as static false and sample, and it is a type of sample component. And this dot sample will not be available in ng on init or ng do check or ng on chase. It will be only available in ng after content init. So you can get hold of that in this ng after content init by simply saying this dot sample. Using this, you can also change the color, okay, of the component. The color is available because in the sample component I have something called color. You see, based on the color, the style is getting applied. Background color is applied. That's why we are able to see that color. Using that, you can change the background color. It is an instance variable. Excuse me. So this is about at content child. This is a very important question. Okay. So which lifecycle method will be called when all complete view is initialized? When the complete view is ready, what is the lifecycle hook which will get called? Okay. The the lifecycle hook is called as ng after view init. Okay, this lifecycle hook will be called after the entire view is ready. And as I told you in ng after content init, you can refer the content in this lifecycle hook. Likewise, you can refer the view. You can get hold of the view in the component class in this lifecycle only, after this lifecycle only. Because before this lifecycle, or ng on changes or ng after content init or ng do check, the view will not be completely ready. Only from this lifecycle hook, you can access the complete view. For that, we use something called at view child. Let's move back to our application. Okay. In this, I have, as here also I have mentioned. Okay, if you see ng after view unit, I have put the console log. Okay, for for making you understand how we can get hold of the view. Okay, I've used a reference template reference variable at wrapper. Okay, we just add a hash and the any name you want. So here I have mentioned it as wrapper. So I want to get a reference element ref of this HTML element so that I can change the value inside it or whatever, change the color or whatever. So only in this, only after this method, ng after view init, you can refer the view. Okay. So here the view name is maybe you can put it before this ng after content init itself, and I'm asking for wrapper, whatever the wrapper refers to the template reference variable. That wrapper, I want the view, that view in this instance variable, and it is of type element reference. Okay, it just gives the element reference of the HTML element. Okay, we can access it in this method now. In this dot wrapper will give you that element reference. Okay, let us see that element reference. So if you go to the console, You can see it gets called after content init is getting called. Okay, after content init is getting called. After that, you can see ng after view init. In this, before this is getting printed, as per our code, you can see we have tried to print child wrapper this dot wrapper. So in that you can see the element ref of this view, this complete view. This complete view is employee component. Okay, as we know, the employee component is the child component. So this gives the native element of the complete employee element, employee component. So since you have the reference to the HTML element, you can use this to change the color or content of it. So here if you see, you can easily see all that element, child sample words. Maybe if you change the inner text here, the text will get changed. So now you can access the complete view. Okay. So let us move to the next question now. Hope this is clear for you. So okay, or initialized in ng after view init. So in this method, the complete view is available. What is view child? As I told you, using this decorator, you can reference the view. You can get the element reference of the complete view. You just need to add a template reference, and using that reference, if you mention it in the view child, it will put that element reference of the view inside whatever the name you have mentioned. Okay, whatever name you have mentioned, it will put inside that. Here I have mentioned it in wrapper. Here it will put the element reference, and this element reference can be taken in this lifecycle hook. Okay. Okay, and it will be available only in after ng after view unit, because only in this lifecycle the complete view gets initialized. Okay. Which is the lifecycle method where cleanup tasks can be done. So it is simple. It is ng on destroy. This is the lifecycle hook which will be called when the component is when the user moves out of the component or component is destroyed. Okay. I can show you that in this example. If you move out of this component, right? Maybe I've written a logic here, like in the employee list, I've written a logic. When it is not equal to ABC, it will show this child component. So if you mention ABC here, this child component should be destroyed because I have put ng if not equal to ABC. So let's see that. I will clear it and I will put ABC now. So now that child component is destroyed. So the child destroy, ng on destroy on the child component will be called. So this will be called. Okay. Here you can put all the cleanup tasks. Like if you want to close your database connections, all can be done here. Okay. So this is what about ng on destroy. And let's move on to the next question. What is the last lifecycle hood to be called in the lifecycle of a component or directive? It is ng on destroy. And as I told, it will be called when it is destroyed. The component is destroyed. So what are the lifecycle methods that will be called only once in the lifecycle? These are the methods which will be called only once in the lifecycle of a component. Ng on init, ng after content init, after view init, ng on destroy. All other methods, all other life cycles will be called whenever the digest, whenever the check has to happen, like ng do check, And we also have ng after content check, which will check the content of the view, whether it has to get updated. In the similar, ng after view check also will check for any updation need to be done in the content of the view. Okay, this is about this.